Okay, good morning everyone. My name's Adam Jacobs. I'm an architect, or a Microsoft architect actually at Polycom. I spend a lot of my time working on video and audio solutions that work with Lync.
Dustin Hannafin. I'm a Microsoft Solutions Architect with Polycom, really focused around helping customers understand various options when they're looking to integrate, interoperate traditional video solutions with Lync.
Okay. So the agenda for today is to first of all just give a brief background on the new video capabilities in Lync, specifically where it's relevant to being interoperable with any kind of standards-based or traditional video system. Then I'm going to just give an update on panoramic video, again where relevant, and then go through H.264 and some of the differences between the Microsoft implementation and what you typically see in a room system that you might already have deployed within an organization. Last year, myself, Jeff Schertz and Mike Stacey did a similar session, so we're going to go a little bit deeper into what the differences are this year. We're also going to do an update. So again, last year we did an overview of some of the solutions out there today that allow you to take systems and bring Lync and non-Lync into a conference call in various different scenarios. So sort of based on what's happened since then, since Lync 2013 has been in the market, I just want to give everyone an update and a refresher on what's out there and what's happening. We've also got a demo that we're going to run, hopefully. It's actually something that myself and a few other folks at Polycom have been working on. So we'll show you that. It's not released. It's very beta, even alpha. We've got a network here which is obviously shared, and we've got no FEC either. So you're going to see it all warts and all, so just prepare for that, if it in fact works. And then Dustin is going to go through the alignment of video solutions based on room size, application, business needs, and then also go through user experience, because obviously the user experience, depending on the type of solution you deploy, is very different. And then finally, we're going to touch on Lync Room System. This is an interoperability session, so we're going to mainly focus on traditional video, but we will, or Dustin will, be also talking about Lync Room System as well. So, 3 key takeaways that we'd like you to pick up on today. One is obviously to know how to bring traditional video into Lync, or Lync into traditional video. And then a bit of a deeper understanding on H.264 and what the difference is between the Microsoft version and the non-Microsoft version. And then finally, just go through some of the considerations you need to take into account when you're selecting the right solution. It's not just a case of what's shiny and what's small or what works with your screens. There's a whole load of considerations, and Dustin's going to go into that a bit later on. So first up, we're going to talk now just a little bit about some of the changes around the codecs. And this is quite important because it really, from a starting point, this is how we know how we can integrate with Lync. So, of course, previously in Lync 2010, there was this H.263 codec that was available. And this was something that you could leverage with a room system for point-to-point calling to Lync. It wouldn't give you the best video in the world, but it was, in many cases, good enough. It would give you CIF, or 352 by 288 resolution. So that's obviously gone now. And of course, when Lync 2013 came into market, a lot of customers needed to look at what they had and to think a bit more about integration. Just a quick show of hands, who has already integrated traditional video with Lync 2013? So like 3. Okay, another show of hands. Who thinks they might have to at some point? Okay, most people do. Okay, good. You're in the right place. That's a good start. Okay, so we're going to go through that. That's good. So of course, there's a new codec that's come into play, and that's the H.264 SVC codec, or X-H.264UC, as it's advertised in SDP, which of course is also different to how you might see a traditional room system advertise it. We've got 3 new audio codecs, 2 which have been added recently. So we've got G722, and that's in addition to the regular G722. This is the stereo version as well. And that's really there for Lync room systems and being able to leverage stereo mics, stereo speakers. And then finally, the Silk codecs. If anyone's running a relatively up-to-date Lync client and they look at the SDP caps exchange, you'll see Silk is advertised there. And if anyone went to the Skype video deep dive, I think it was yesterday, that is there so that at the point where Microsoft releases version 2 of their Skype gateway, you can do point-to-point media without doing any sort of transcoding or mediation. So that's good. It's not doing a lot now, but it will. There's also a number of changes to resolutions and the supported resolutions. So previously, you could take a real-time video client and you could do 720p from a point-to-point perspective and VGA multi-point. And of course, that's still the same today. So if you bring a Lync 2010 client or a Lync for Mac client into a Lync 2013 call, then those restrictions are going to apply. So nothing changes there. The other thing to bear in mind is because the new codec supports up to 1080p 30, you need to also have the right computer in place, the right amount of processors, quad-core or above. You need to also, where possible, have a UVC 1.5 camera, and Windows 8 also helps. And of course, all those prerequisites are measured as a part of the Windows Experience Index, which the Lync client relies on. And there's a whole load of logic in the Lync client that Microsoft have created that basically allows you to do certain things in certain scenarios. We had an interesting situation a couple of weeks back where we were trying to get 1080p video between 2 Lync clients, and we couldn't do it. We noticed the call just wouldn't go to full HD. And actually, I realized that because the lighting in the room wasn't great, and if we took the laptop out of that poor lighting environment, all of a sudden we were able to do a higher resolution. So lots of logic in there that sometimes you need to work out. And of course, not all of it is always documented. So, you're all probably familiar with gallery view. I suspect you wouldn't be here if you weren't, so I'm not going to tell you what gallery view is. But I do want to tell you that gallery view is obviously facilitated by SVC. And what's happening here is, of course, multiple streams of video with different resolutions and different frame rates, or streams of video with multiple frame rates are being sent to multiple clients. So in this scenario here, we've got 6 clients which are in the standing row, and then we've got another 5 that are in the sitting row. So up to 5 of the active speakers can be seen, but of course that layout is dynamic also. So if I wanted to, I could take someone from the sitting row and I could promote them by pinning them. And the moment I do that, I'm going to make a request behind the scenes, or a video source request, to another client via the AVMCU, and then that other client, which may not be sending video, is all of a sudden going to start sending video based on that request. So let's look at that in a bit more detail. So I'm going to go through two scenarios. And the first scenario is where we've got a range of Lync 2013 based clients. So no real-time videos being sent. This is just SVC. But the one thing you'll notice here, and I have simplified this diagram. So this diagram actually shows multiple streams of video, but it doesn't show the different types of frame rates. So bear in mind that if I was going to do this, go into even more technical detail here, each one of these streams of video could also facilitate 3 different types of frame rates at the same time. So we can see participant 5 there, or sorry, participant 3 is a Windows phone. That Windows phone may only be able to receive 7.5 frames a second. So it's going to discard some of the frames within that video stream so that it's just left with 7.5 frames. And that's going to be done by the AVMCU. Okay, so just to point out some other things that are going on here. We've got various clients. On the client number 1 there, we've got a Windows client running a panoramic video device. So of course there, that device is receiving the 5 streams of video, and it's sending 2 streams. One, the panoramic strip, and the other being the active speaker. Now some of those clients, as you can see, aren't receiving the panoramic video. So you have to bear in mind that certain types of clients are going to get a different type of experience, and of course the experience is going to be different because, the experience is going to result in different types of streams being sent and received by that client. In the case of clients 3 and 5, you can see one stream is received, one stream is sent, because that's still, those mobile clients are only doing this single active speaker experience. In the case of Lync Room System, it's getting the full experience, including panoramic video. And then with participant number 2, you can see that's running a modern client or a Windows RT device. That's receiving 4 streams and sending 1. So I don't know if anyone's seen, but the gallery view on one of those devices is 4 speakers rather than 5, hence the reason why there's less streams. So moving on to another scenario where we're bringing real-time video in. And in this case, we've got a Lync for Mac client. That's going to trigger, obviously, real-time video being sent by the other clients as well. Now, there is some logic there, so the clients themselves are going to have a limit of up to 5 independent streams. Now, getting 5 independent streams being sent is going to be incredibly rare, almost impossible to achieve, but there's a limit. And if anyone is concerned around the bandwidth requirements and how that might look, or general planning information, then if you haven't already gone to Jeff's session, you're definitely not going to the second one because it's now. But if you haven't seen it, then definitely after the conference, it's worth watching that video because it goes into more detail around the bandwidth required to facilitate this type of calling. So what I'm trying to illustrate here is that there's a whole load of complexity going on behind the scenes that facilitates the gallery view layout and basically means that the Lync server as a software-based MCU can, without any kind of video transcoding, give you, a continuous presence style experience, which of course Microsoft called Gallery View. Just a quick update. So there are also some changes to panoramic video as well. And there is a next generation panoramic video device, including the older panoramic devices, which also behave differently in Lync 2013. So for example, what was 1056 by 144 resolution in Lync 2010 is now moved to 960 by 144, just to squish it slightly so that it fits within that layout. When you start to use that with SVC, then you start to get a higher resolution, and the processing requirements are lower than they would be for active speaker video. So a dual core will give you a 1920 by 288 panoramic video strip. The one thing that often confuses people is that if you're running a 19 by 20 desktop, and you're running a panoramic video conference with Lync, then your active speaker video is not going to have enough real estate on the desktop to facilitate anything bigger than 720p. I've had a few questions in the past, what if you minimize the panoramic video? Today, even if you minimize that strip of video, you're still going to be restricted to 720p active speaker. So actually, if you wanted to do anything more than that, you'd really need to be running a 4K monitor with your Lync client, which is probably not something you can do in everyday use. So let's move on and talk a bit about H.264. Now, I've broken this down into two components. And this is specifically around why H.264 doesn't just work. And of course, when Lync 2013 came out, there was a lot of confusion around, oh, so I can just take my endpoint to Microsoft's point that's got cobwebs on and just clean the cobwebs away, and it's just going to work with Lync 2013. And of course, that wasn't the case. And there's a number of reasons why, and there are now some solutions in market and more solutions coming in market which address some of these problems. And I'm going to go over the different types of solutions once I've explained the problem. So the first problem is around the bit stream, so that the raw video or the media. Now, Microsoft are using what's called UC config mode 1, which is a type of SVC. And that type of SVC is where you're sending multiple video streams, each with its own type of resolution. And with each of those streams, you have multiple frame rates. So, for example, I'd be sending 7.5, 7.5, and 15. Taken together, I'm getting 30 frames. If I discard any of those, so if I discard the 15, then I'm left with 15. And if I discard the 15 and the 7.5, I'm left with 7.5. So each video stream, which represents a separate resolution, has the ability to be scalable from a frame rate perspective. So this standard, and there's multiple modes of SVC, others which have a video stream which is also scalable. But in this case, each resolution is a separate stream. And if you need to, or you'd like to read any more information about that, and you want some bedtime reading, there's a red line documentation on MSDN which will definitely help you sleep better. So that SVC information includes something new called PaxiNow. And PaxiNow, and this is as high level as I can be without, I want to give you the detail, but I'm not drilling down into stuff that's going to make you guys sleep as well. But the PaxiNow is used by Lync for three primary purposes. So one is a way of understanding the layouts. So without the clients going into that video and reading the information to see what's the width, what's the height, what's the resolution, the bit rate, it's basically indexing it so it knows what it is ahead of time. There's also cropping information, and this is all held within the SEI. Now, this cropping information, I don't know if anyone's seen it, but when you're on a gallery view call, your Lync client by default is set to crop you. And of course, it's got this facial recognition in there, and based on where you are, it's going to almost give you that feeling like it's tracking you. Of course, it's not tracking you, it's just sending the full video stream, but it's updating the cropping coordinates in real time. And those cropping coordinates are interpreted by other Lync clients that receive that information as a part of the PaxiNow. Now, there are certain types of Lync clients which, of course, don't, or they send the cropping coordinates, but the cropping coordinates effectively represent an uncropped image or the full video stream. So those would be, for example, a Lync room system or a panoramic video device. Of course, you can bypass it yourself by going into the video options and turning cropping off, and then the cropping information, or the framing will be lost, and you'll just send cropping information that gives you the full stream. So that's held within there. And then finally, there's information that can be used for packet loss, so bitstream information for error recovery. So that's the bitstream deltas. And of course, any H.264 high-profile endpoint that you have today, it won't support that. And there are ways in which that information can be discarded so that it will work. And we'll go through that in a moment. So the second piece, and some of this is SVC specific, and some of it's just Lync specific. So it would be the same in Lync 2010. There are other signaling changes. So for example, the SIP that's being used is it's Microsoft SIP. It's not standard SIP. In fact, there's probably no such thing as standard SIP, if I'm honest. But in this case here, we've got three types of information which are very different. So one would be SSRC allocation, and this is a synchronization source allocation. So these are unique identifiers that are given to each media stream as they're sent and received to Lync clients in an AVMCU so they can be referenced quickly. The other would be PLI, or picture loss information, and this is used where you've got a very bad network problem. You know, your FEC, or forward error correction, isn't saving you, and you've lost a whole load of frames, and you need to resync. And it needs to know, or needs to understand, the Lync client needs to understand where you need to resync from. And then the last one, which is very important with Lync, and it's new to Lync 2013, is the video source requests. And this is what's used when you're on a gallery view or a multi-point call on the Lync server to request different resolutions or video from a client that's not sending video previously. And this would have been handled differently in Lync 2010, but also as a part of RTCP. So, again, signaling's different. So last year we kind of just said, signaling's different, video's not quite right, but now there's a bit more detail behind it. And this is relevant in some of the forthcoming slides. In fact, it's relevant in this one. So one of the first ways in which you can make this work, and when I say this, I mean taking a traditional room system and allowing it to call a Lync client, is by putting in place what's referred to as a back-to-back user agent. And I've got two examples here. One would be potentially the video interoperability server, which Microsoft have announced. You know, that would be a back-to-back user agent. Another would be a Cisco VCS, which someone earlier referred to. And of course, in both of those cases, what needs to happen here is that PAX-email information that we referred to on the first slide needs to be discarded. So it needs to be removed, and we need to send the full video stream without any of that information, because that information is just going to confuse the endpoint. The other thing that we need to do is we need to make sure that we have a way to register that endpoint using the signaling that it understands. So there needs to be some translation. Now, that's great if you want to take your existing deployment of endpoints or room systems and you want them to work without replacing them. So that's excellent. The only problem is there's a few other considerations that you need to be aware of. So for example, when you make a link-to-link call, the video is happening between one Lync client and another Lync client. Now in this scenario, every single Lync call is going to have to go via wherever your back-to-back user agent is. Now in certain environments, that's okay. But sometimes when you've got a complex network and you're calling from one part of the world to the other, it's not optimal use of your wide area network. So point-to-point signaling, point-to-point media would be a con. A pro would be you can use your existing endpoints and leveraging your existing endpoint, your existing investment. The other thing is that because there's no transcoding here and the video is being sent as is, the video experience is going to be limited to a single active speaker switching. So you're not going to get gallery view video on a non-SVC endpoint. It's just not going to happen. Now there is a demo we're going to do later, which I mentioned, which kind of makes that work. So it sort of breaks that rule, but we'll come back to that in a moment. The final thing, which can be a negative, is really around scheduling. So, of course, in a Lync environment, scheduling is always done by the online Lync online meeting invite. And that's usually, used by everyone. They understand it. It's easy. They click to join. That is obviously not something that a traditional room system is necessarily going to understand. So we'll come back to another way around that in a moment. The second way is by using some sort of third-party MCU. Here I've put up life size. Obviously, I'm familiar with the Polycom MCU. But this approach is slightly different. So what's happening here is that the call is facilitated by what's commonly referred to as a virtual meeting room. So everyone is dialing the MCU rather than dialing point-to-point. And of course, when you give out that number, everyone knows that they can dial that number or that SIP URI, and everything's going to work there. Now, that's good in one case because you know that everything's going to work. But if they're using Lync Online meetings as well, then sometimes it gets complex, and you don't necessarily always want to have every single meeting on the MCU. So there needs to be a bit of intelligence, and sometimes the use case can be confusing. So the good news is everything works. The good news is you're going to get that Hollywood Squares layout. In fact, you're probably going to get an even better layout than you get from Lync, but it is a confusing join scenario. And again, scheduling can be complex. There are third-party solutions and ways around it, but you may end up with 2 scheduling solutions in that case versus just one. In that case there, media is going directly to the bridge. So again, another point worth recognizing. And of course, transcoding is happening there on the MCU. So the MCU is building this composition so that you can see everyone that's dialed into the virtual meeting room. Okay. So the next one and the final example I'm going to use is a native integration. And this is great, but at the same time, not everyone has the luxury of doing it. In this case, the endpoint is really, it's acting like a Lync client. So it's going to understand Microsoft SIP. It's going to, if it's SVC capable, it's going to do SVC. It may even give you a multi-stream or gallery view-like layout so you can see everyone that's on the Lync call. So it's great. It's going to give you the best experience. Media is going to go between the endpoint and the Lync client if it's a point-to-point call. If it's a multi-point call, obviously, as per design of Lync, it's going to go via the Lync server. You may also get higher quality video as well from a point-to-point perspective. But again, as I mentioned earlier, media is that, whilst that could be a higher bandwidth media, it's going to go between you and the Lync client and via the AVMC for multi-point. Content can be complex in a number of these solutions. There are third-party solutions that some vendors have for content. Something to be aware of. It's one of the big sticking points that we certainly are aware of, and I think you're going to cover content later on, is that if you go for an optimized room system, so a Lync-based room system or an LRS system, then obviously those content issues are going to go away. And Dustin's going to cover content a little bit later on. I mentioned earlier also existing endpoints are going to be replaced and upgraded, and of course that's the biggest negative in this scenario. So there is one other interesting topology that comes into play, and that's Lync Online. Just a quick show of hands, how many people in this room are running Lync Online? 1, 2. So everyone else on premises? Yeah, okay. So not a problem for this room necessarily for the most part, but I certainly, and I'm sure Dustin does, hear a lot of customers moving into Lync Online, and of course that makes things a lot more complicated. And the biggest problem we have around that is the type of authentication that's used. Now, if you have a Lync room system, or you have, if anyone's familiar with the CX7000, then those are running Lync clients. And of course, they support this new authentication that Microsoft is using in Lync Online. So that complexity goes away. But if you're not, then, and you have a requirement for a traditional system, then there's an alternative approach that you can follow. So I'm just going to go through a topology. So here we've got Lync Online deployed. We've got what Microsoft refer to as split domains. So what we're doing here is we put in place a Lync server on premises, and we've associated it with a Lync Online instance. So all of our Lync users are actually homed within Lync Online, but then our endpoints are then registered on premises, and these would be native integration endpoints. And then if we don't have those and we just have regular endpoints, we can bring into play a third-party MCU. So in this scenario here, we're associating an on-premises Lync server to one in the cloud, and we're using that split domain integration so that we can register those endpoints that don't understand org ID, and where we don't have any endpoints that even have native integration, they can dial into a virtual meeting room. And this would be accessible by a Lync client that's homed in Office 365 or on-prem. The one thing worth pointing out here is that traditionally when you deploy this type of configuration, you have to create a static route on your Lync server. Now, static routes force the traffic to go in a particular direction. Now, Lync Online split domain requires that if a user is homed online, they have to share the same. They would share the same SIP domain as someone who was on-prem. Now, if we start routing video in another direction, then it breaks that integration. So you must make sure in this type of scenario you configure a separate route on your Lync server. So, for example, video.domain.com versus just domain.com. So, I'm now going to do a demo, hopefully. Dustin's going to help me, hopefully. So before I do the demo, I'm going to talk through what we're going to do, because it's a little confusing. There we go. Right. So this is a smart cascading demo, and there's it's a new. I'd like to say it's a new feature. It's not a feature yet, but it's something that we've developed that hopefully will end up in a new feature. What we're going to do here is we're going to use both a standards-based MCU. In this case, we're using just software, so it's just a virtualized MCU. And we're using the Lync server MCU, and we're going to bring the two together automatically. So on the right-hand side there, you can see we've got some Lync clients. Now, typically, the Lync clients are going to join a conference call via an invite. So the invite's been sent to those clients. They've clicked and they've joined the call. And of course, once they join the call, they're going to get their gallery view video. And of course, video is going to go back and forth between the Lync server and the clients. Okay, so this is just your regular Lync meeting. So that's the first part of our call, or our demo, I should say. Now, what we're going to do is, when that invite is sent out to those clients, the Lync server has generated a conference ID. Now, this is a standard Lync feature. We're not doing any magic. We're not using any extra software or anything to do this. Now, once that conference ID is dialed via our standards-based endpoint that we've got here, it's going to trigger a lookup. So that lookup is going to go against the Lync server, and it's going to find out where the conference is being held. And it's going to give me a conference SIP URI. Once I've got that conference SIP URI, I'm going to take our MCU and I'm going to automatically have it dialing into the conference. Now, the cool part is that once that's dialed in, I'm going to get the Lync server to send me all of the video streams from all the Lync clients. Now, we don't have, how many have we got there? 5. We don't have 5 here today. I think we've got 3.
3.
So imagine the layout to have more Lync clients, if you wish. But the experience, if we did have more, would look like as follows. So on the left-hand side there, you can see the composition that we're getting from our MCU. And that layout is going to show us all of our Lync clients, and it's also going to show us our NEH323 or SIP endpoints as well. On the right-hand side, we can see the gallery that the Lync clients are seeing, and of course, now they're seeing this virtual meeting room or this standards-based endpoint that we've got here dialing in. Now, this could be any endpoint. In this case, I'm using, obviously, a Polycom one because it was easy for me to get my hands on. But it could be, Cisco, it could be Tamberg, it doesn't matter what it is. And it also doesn't matter whether it's SIP or it's H323 as well. So,
ready to
should we give it a go?
give it a go.
Okay, so let's first of all walk through the Lync side. So that was I think this one, right? 8. There you go. First time lucky. Right. So on this side here, on my laptop, I've received an invite, as you can see. The invite's got the conference ID in, and I've joined the meeting. So to save time, we've got our conference call up and running. I've clicked, I've joined. Dustin's over here. I'm over there. We can probably bring another client in a moment. But right now, we have a multi-point going on the Lync server. So now I'm going to switch over to the other side and to our endpoint. Okay. So earlier on, we saw that conference ID, which I've now forgotten. 1789. Okay, so I'm going to dial that conference ID, which was 17894. Is that right?
Yep.
17894.
Yep.
Right. And I'm going to just dial it. Fingers crossed.
This is over the internet, by the way.
Yes. And we've got 2 streams. There we go. So that's basically those 2 video streams on that Lync server are now seen. So what's happened here is our MCU has taken those video streams, it's cascaded it, dialed in, and it's using SVC to take each separate video stream. In some cases, request using VSRs an even better video stream based on the layout that's available, and we've populated the layout there. So obviously not a great network, alpha stuff, very dangerous, but you can see what we've developed there is a very easy way of having Lync users using the Lync online invite as they usually do, leveraging existing endpoints, preserving the experience, and yeah, it's the easiest way to have things working in a very familiar way in which users would operate standards-based video and Lync clients. So I'm going to hand over to you.
All right, I get to do the second half of our session.
Let me put you back here.
Which is hangover recovery exercises. For everybody that partied a little too hard last night. It also may take you guys a few minutes for the accent transition between the two of us.
Cheers, Dustin.
So I'm going to go a little bit higher level from where Adam was. So we've been very deep this morning on talking about H.264, some of the new things in H.264. I'm going to bring things up a little bit to a higher level around a user experience. So what happens when I start integrating traditional-based room systems with Lync? What type of user experience can I expect from my users? I know we saw a lot of hands of people who haven't done that integration yet but are looking at doing it. And we're going to point out some things that you need to be aware of and some considerations you need to take into effect whenever you're really starting to do that interop configuration. One thing you'll want to consider, if you're an existing video shop, which I think most people here are, this stuff is normal to you, right? If you're an existing Lync customer and you're trying to do video, it's new to your organization, some things that you may really want to consider when you start deploying Lync Room System. You start deploying, maybe you acquire an organization that has those traditional video endpoints. Sometimes those rooms are going to get beyond just the technology. I think most of us here, are the geeky technology. We like the buttons and the bells and whistles. But there's a lot of considerations that come into play when you're actually setting up a room and getting it ready for video. And it can come down to anything from the color of the walls that are in the room for a good user experience. Sometimes you're going to need audio capabilities that maybe cover a large conference room like a room like this, where sitting a mic on a table is not going to cover the range that you need. So a lot of different things that you need to consider when you're actually setting up rooms and getting rooms video ready for your end users. Don't take this as 100% guidance. but this is really an example of some things you're going to need to start looking at when you're deploying video in your environment. You're going to want to templatize the different room types you have. So when you say, you know what, I need to set up a huddle room, here's my options from a technology perspective, again, for the best user experience. So one example I'll give you is we actually have a huddle space or executive office option on our table here. And it's giving you some of the options of endpoints and how those might integrate, whether it's just doing LRS directly within Lync, nothing else in between, or perhaps there's an existing Cisco Tandberg unit in his office that you're going to need to interoperate with, kind of some of the options you're going to need to look at. Again, don't take this as 100% truth, but take this as an example of some things you're going to need to think about and consider and build out as you look at adopting video in your environment. Another big question comes up about immersive. Any immersive telepresence customers in the room today? Few existing. Obviously, you've made big investments in immersive telepresence if you've bought telepresence. If you're just starting out in video, it may be cost prohibitive, but it's also an experience that certain executives expect, and they're still good for a lot of scenarios that customers have in their environments. A couple examples are day-long meetings where you need a very comfortable environment for people to reside in. The other thing is a lot of times immersive telepresence rooms can support large groups. So I may want to have an immersive telepresence room with 24 people, 30 people in that room, and I want to preserve a good video experience. Again, it may be a little cost prohibitive for some people, but it is something you need to consider when you're deploying video in your environment, that there may be some use cases where you do need immersive. Talking a little bit about comparing video experiences. I think everybody here is very familiar with gallery view, what that looks like, what that feels like, the number of video streams you're receiving. We'll talk about a little bit about the traditional video side as well. So gallery view, I won't go into detail. A couple of things I'll point out, though, is because it's a native Lync experience, you get all the Lync features, right? So I'm going to see my roster if I'm coming in from a Lync room system. I've got abilities to mute, unmute various participants from the system I'm dialing in with without having a PC in the room. I also can do in-meeting IM, right? So Lync room system gives me that capability. As we start transitioning over to traditional video systems, you'll need to understand that you're going to lose some of those features, right? The software built into those old Tandberg units doesn't have a way to show your attendee list or the ability to show presence or have IM within that session. Another thing you're going to realize is the layouts and the views are sometimes different when you're looking at those types of environments. So the users on the Lync side, you're going to get that gallery view, right? When you move more towards traditional video infrastructure, you're going to see up to 16, maybe more video streams coming into that environment. So it's something that your users need to be aware of, right, is that they're going to see a little bit differences in the experience when they transition from one to the other. And I think I mentioned most of these already. Again, that traditional room system, they're not going to have a lot of the controls that come into play. Another thing that customers bring up a lot with me when I'm speaking with them, they don't really think about the content aspect until, wait a second, I did all this work to do this audio-video integration, and I start having calls with traditional video systems, and all of a sudden somebody on their Lync client starts sharing content, whether it be a whiteboard or their screen. And they're like, wait a second, this doesn't work. Why does this not work? So the problem is traditional systems use what's called H239 BFCP type content protocols to use content in those types of calls. Lync is using RDP, the remote desktop protocol we're all familiar with, PSOM and HTML5. It's also important, and I'll get into some options that some partners, some vendors are actually looking at trying to solve that gap, including Polycom, of helping that content sharing between those. But I think it's important before we get into that to really understand some of the content delivery methods. You think about content, what's content like? You're going to need to understand how people are using those rooms for content. Maybe you have an environment or users where 99% of their content use cases is really somebody showing a PowerPoint presentation, and there's not a ton of collaboration going on. But there may be certain use cases where somebody walks into a room and they want to have a video experience to where we can do real-time collaboration between the people in this room and the people in another room. So it's important to understand what type of content delivery is going on from your users. So how do we bridge this content gap? Being upfront and honest, there's not a ton of solutions and options in market today. It's something that I think the video industry is looking at. How do we bridge that gap? And some ideas that some people are looking at is, there is a capability to do transcoding with RDP. So when people are doing screen sharing, you could potentially transcode the RDP protocol back into H.239 BFCP type format. There's some questions around the quality of content when you do transcoding with RDP, but it is one potential case. Another option would be to actually get H.239 BFCP content to the Lync client itself. And that usually involves some types of client-side plugin that talks to the Lync client SDKs to allow owning some part of that content window on the Lync client, allowing native BFCP content coming into the Lync client. Some other options that customers look at is they just, we'll do content out of band when we're in a traditional room system. So I walk into that traditional room system, I dial into the call, and then basically I share content with my Lync client on my PC or tablet while I'm in that call. So the traditional room system is doing audio, video only for that call. And then the other thing to point out, obviously, is Lync Room System does do all of the native Lync content types. Another thing you need to consider when integrating with traditional video is the mobility aspect, right? Microsoft has written all of these nice mobility clients now. We can carry on our Windows phones or iPhones or Androids, and even various tablets that we may have. An assumption a lot of people make is, hey, I can dial into a standards-based endpoint because my desktop was able to. But that's not necessarily the case in interop scenarios because there's different resolutions involved with the Lync mobile clients. So if I'm a traditional video environment, that video solution is going to have to be software updated to support those different resolutions before it's going to support those mobile clients in some scenarios. So the key takeaway there is mileage may vary. You may plug up a traditional video endpoint, take one of the interop methods Adam mentioned before, and you may actually, video may actually work from 3 different phone types that you have. All of a sudden you have another user buys a new tablet, dials into that meeting, and he gets weird green pixelation, isn't able to really send or receive video in that call. Something to consider, again, when you're doing interop. You'll want to do a lot of testing just to make sure that you're going to have a good user experience. Another thing I'll cover is using Lync Room System with traditional video environments, right? I think everybody in here has seen Lync Room System this week. Probably a lot of excitement about looking at deploying Lync Room System in your environment. One thing you're going to want to think about is, well, how does that integrate with traditional Cisco systems I may have in environment? What's the experience going to be like? There is a software update that just came out a few weeks ago, I think, for Lync Room System that actually allows it to do point-to-point calls now. So now I can actually dial a Lync Room System into a virtual meeting room hosted on another bridge. New capability, so it doesn't just have to join the Lync MCU. But again, we go back to that content story, right? That traditional MCU may be doing or will be doing BFCP type content where Lync Room System is going to expect native Lync type content capabilities. So kind of wrapping up, we're a little bit early here, but wrapping up our session, one, you got a lot of options when you look at doing video interop. And you kind of start from the left-hand side and going across. These are some of the impacts of what options you choose. And it really comes down to, do I have an existing investment that I need to protect? We had some immersive customers in the room. That's obviously a very big investment in your environment. If you've made that, you're not going to rip and replace all of that video equipment. So you need some type of interop to happen. And that can either be a native interop experience. You can even start as low as the new built-in interop capabilities coming into the next version of Lync that was mentioned this week. And you can always transition to, over time, you may want to deploy a lot of Lync room systems in your environment for that native experience collaboration capability for your end users. So, summary here. I think you really need to start thinking about your end users' needs, right? What are all of those different scenarios I'm going to run into when I start doing video interop, and what are the requirements? It always starts at that end user experience. So no matter what technical things we can do and capabilities, we need to try to provide the best user experience possible. Also remember, other factors are going to come in when you're selecting a video solution for your rooms, whether that be a traditional based system or basically a Lync room system. You need to think about room size. What's the configuration? What's the layout? Right? If I have a large room like this, I'm probably not going to want to do a panoramic camera in the front of the room because it's not going to be a good video experience for my users. So you're really going to need to think through those. And going back to that template, create your own template for your environment so you know when we're deploying video to this specific type of room, here's 2 or 3 options we have to really provide that best of breed experience. And then alignment with your respective technology departments. You need to work with the different organizations. I know a lot of the customers I work with, when they're looking at video, it's not just the IT guys involved in that video conversation. It's business owners, it's scheduling organizations. You know, a lot of organizations get into a huge complex scheduling situation when they're booking rooms. They want to have catering for immersive type rooms when executives are coming in to have those calls. So you need to align with the different groups within your organization to make sure that you're selecting the right solutions and right capabilities for those users. I think with that, we're good with some Q&A. I don't know if you guys want to use the mics if you have Q&A. Any questions with Video Opera overall? We got one right here.
With that upgrade that's coming to Lync with the built-in gateway, they talked about timbre, but will it also connect to existing Polycom infrastructure?
So the question was what kind of endpoints are to be supported as a part of the video interoperability server. So Microsoft have announced specific endpoints, and I can't go over how they're extending that outside of that list. I'd like to think they will, but they've only announced what they've announced, and obviously I can't share more on that.
Yeah, and the one thing I will say from Polycom specific is our endpoints, we already build the native integration into our endpoints themselves. So the capability's there today. So if you have a Polycom endpoint, then you have the capability to plug that into Lync today and get that native integration experience. So the video interop service, we'll see what happens, but from our perspective, we're already doing that today in those endpoints.
And you're going to get there. So when I mentioned earlier the point-to-point media, you're not going to have to put your media and your signaling via Lync. Also, if your endpoint is a Lync 2013 qualified endpoint, it's even going to give you SVC or gallery view video as well, or multi-stream video. Yeah.
I have a Polycom-specific question. I've done a deployment somewhere with the
So,
ITV license.
can I ask you to use my? Sorry, they're recording.
So.
Thank you.
I deployed a Polycom solution with just barely just endpoints, and the customer asked to have an integration with the RTV license. And when they had multi-party conferences, as long as it was multi-party Polycom solutions, everything was okay. But when they started doing multi-party Lync clients on one of those Polycom endpoints, it didn't work. So I was wondering, is there any chance in the future that that will be supported?
So and you did have the real-time video license loaded on the endpoint?
Yes.
So yeah, so in that case, when you start having calling with other Lync clients, the call takes place on the Lync server, not on the actual endpoint. That's by design. So whilst there is an internal multi-point on the endpoint, it won't use that when you're using Lync clients. And that's related to the video codecs that are being used as well.
But is there any chance that that will change?
I'm afraid not.
Okay.
Sorry.
Any other questions? We have some nice Skype.
Yes, if you've got a good question, we've got Skype vouchers.
Don't leave without picking up some free Skype minutes here.
So the smart cascading that you showed, is that available today on your MCUs or?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's not right now. It's something that we would like to deliver in the second half of the year, but it's still sort of, it's basically this is the first time we've shown it publicly. Okay. So we need a little bit of time to clean things up, add forward error correction, and also we're going through testing with Microsoft as well. So hopefully in the second half.
So just to follow up, we don't currently have a Polycom infrastructure, but interested in using it on the back end to leverage like Tamberg to Lync integration. What kind of hardware infrastructure am I looking at to do something like that?
Yeah.
With the hopes that I can leverage the cascading.
Sure. I mean, we can obviously take it offline, but what we used today was quite simply two virtual machines. One was an MCU that was doing all of the media transcoding and the composition, and the other was doing the call control. So my endpoint here was registered to one virtual machine, and the media was being handled by the other. So it was just two VMs.
Okay, thank you.
Besides the native integration, is any third-party gateway or MCU will do content sharing? Both ways, content sharing.
So there are a few solutions out there. I'm not 100% familiar with all of them. There's actually some cloud-based solutions that are doing some of that type of transcoding. Blue Jeans would be
like
one
Blue
that I'm
Jeans?
aware of
Yeah.
that's doing that. There may be another one's a Res sitting in front. He knows who those guys are, but
So was there
but yes, there are some
Yeah.
solutions out there doing the RDP transcoding.
And the cascading solution, is it going to do content sharing as well?
There is a content solution that we have in market today. That solution will work with that cascading that we showed you earlier.
Okay.
Well, that's the plan anyway.
Any other questions?
Going once, going twice, and then you can get to lunch early. I think they're
Yes.
serving lunch now.
Yes. Adam and I will be around for a few minutes here.
Yeah.
Obviously, we'll be at the Polycom booth on the expo if you have specific Polycom related questions or just general questions about the session. Happy to answer anything that may come up later.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.